Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so we are back again with my 2020 champion rankings. Now this is the second video of me ranking all of the champions that have been released in 2020. If you haven't seen the first part, I will add it somewhere up top there. There will be a current pop-up. Definitely go back and check that one out, where I basically took spots 22 to 17. I also made quite clear to explain a couple more things. Number one is that I do not only look at the champion's offensive capability or how cool they are and how fun they are offensively, but I also look at overall impact, and that includes their synergies or how potentially dangerous they are in defense, how frequently we can see them on high tier lines or defense, how hard of a defender they are considered to be, and how big of a nightmare they are to go up against. So all things are kind of included, which sparked quite a lot of criticism, and I must definitely add that a lot of Red Goblin fans apparently out there, and I understand he is definitely miles better than some of the champions above him on the list, but as well, please keep in mind that I am considering more than just how potentially good he is in offense, but also how long or easy it is to access, or hard it is to access that damage, how frequently he's used, how good he is as a defender, so on and so forth. So there we go. And yeah, Red Goblin army definitely made me notice them. But I digress. The champion rankings remain the same. This is my opinion. You can have yours, and we will proceed with spot number 16. So basically, I am not taking in consideration the revamps and buffs, so that means no Magneto, no Falcon, no Gambit, no Puncher 2099, and whoever we got reworked in 2020. In addition to that, I am not taking in consideration Wolverine Weapon X and Platinum Pool, because those are kind of like exclusive champions that do not fit in standard release schedule. And also Spider Ham in this case, because he's just about to be released and there is no reasonable way for me to form a decent opinion about him. That being said, let's move on with spot number 16. So we're gonna go from 16th to 7th basically, and leave the top 6 champions of 2020 for the next video. Right, so let's go on spot number 16, and it's Squirrel Girl. Now, Squirrel Girl could have potentially been dropped a bit lower. The reason why I didn't is because she does have several unique things going on for her. For instance, she's the only champion in the game that can gain combo meter without actually landing strikes on opponent, because if you do hit opponent's block with your light attacks, you still increase your combo meter. In addition to that, inflicting bleed through opponent's block is also quite a unique ability. Overall, Squirrel Girl, I think, kind of perfectly matches the description of a champion that's perfectly fine. There's absolutely nothing really wrong with Squirrel Girl. Unfortunately, it's also nothing really good enough to put her in any noteworthy top-tier champion list. She's very fun champion with very cool animations, some unique or relatively unique abilities. She's the first champion that in the game that kind of introduced the idea of combo meter to be used as a currency, and there are certainly some things going on for her. Unfortunately, she's basically outclassed or outshined in pretty much everything that she does. She doesn't have any significant meta relevance, but I do feel that the simple, unique set and aspects of her abilities and some very circumstantial occasions warrant her to pop up to spot number 16. And yeah, so there we go. That is Squirrel Girl. Definitely very fun champion. Unfortunately, one of those that's just not quite good enough. Now, next champion is also going to spark a bit of controversy, I suppose, because there are people who absolutely love her, and in this year, it's quite tricky to rank the champions, because basically from this point forward, every single champion on this list has things going for them. They're not worthless or useless or fails in no means. We have had a very balanced year of champions, where the champions are fun, champions are quite unique, they're not overpowered, and Black Widow Daily Origins definitely fit in the description. She has a very easy access to shock, which is great. Shock is still a relatively exclusive debuff. Not too many champions have a very simple access to shock debuffs. She can stack them up quite easily. That means she can do like destruct lanes, and she's very fun to play. Unfortunately, that same description, maybe minus the shock part, fits pretty much 80% of the skill class that has been released within the last 3 years or so. So, all in all things considered, I think her biggest downfall definitely is her signature ability being completely useless, and that whole idea of sabotage debuffs being there, they just mean nothing in terms of fighting. She has a very solid level 2. Some of her precision and cruelty stacks seem underwhelming. Ability accuracy reduction is there, but it's again not quite good enough to be able to rely on it. There are a lot of things that she kind of can do, but for most part, again, I'm just going to use better versions of different champions or those same ability sets. So definitely not a bad champion at all. I have her as rank 3 5-star. Doubt I'm going to take her up, but she's very fun to use, and that is it. So that is spot number 15. Now, spot number 14 is actually a bit harder. Spot number 14 is a bit harder to accurately describe, I would say. So I actually need to rewind here. Come on, here we go. Whoopsie. My laptop is being a bit slow. Okay, so let's go. Spot number 14. Spot number 14 is going to be Immortal Abomination. Now, he definitely has the potential to move higher up the list. At this point, he kind of suffers from being one of the most recent additions into the contest, and nobody really having had an opportunity to properly put him to the test. Now, again, Immortal Abomination definitely is not a champion without flaws. He has plenty of them, like fairly negligible and pathetic damage output in any circumstance where he can't drop multitudes of level 2s, or opponent's poison immune, then he really doesn't have anything going for him. But that not necessarily is not a deal breaker, because niche specialty champions are quite common. The problem is that he's a niche champion that relies on having access to those level 2s and 3s and being able to kind of like play the fight exactly how you want to play him. In addition to all of that, you do have to be relatively aggressive if you want to get the best out of the character, so that also can work as a downfall. And lastly, you have extremely pathetic base damage output until you kind of get rolling. And I think that's a lot of what separates him from Omega Red, because Omega Red can access to very significant damage output, for instance, very early on in the fight without the need of dropping that level 2, especially if you're running Suicide Masteries. And he overall at large seems pretty much like significantly inferior version to Omega Red. Like, there are far less champions that are immune to whatever Omega Red does, or to be a bit more specific, there's pretty much nobody that's immune to Omega Red's damage. There are many poison immune champions. Omega Red ramps up quicker and can do more damage for any kind of like short to medium level fight. Abomination does have significantly longer ramp up, but also higher damage cap. So overall, I do think that Immortal Abomination will definitely have its uses. For now, it's also, though, matter of speculation, because there is no real actual proof of how significant he's going to be in the game. And judging him on the paper alone, he definitely has quite a large amount of shortcomings as well. Right, let's move on. Spot number 13. We need to keep this going. I don't want to stretch this out too much. And spot number 13 is going to be Storm Pyramid X. Storm Pyramid X is actually a champion that I do like a lot myself, and I do believe that her relevance could potentially be increased in future due to her ability to basically bypass champions that shrug off her parry stance. And she's like a perfect masochism counter, but it's not only masochism that's plaguing MCOC right now. It seems that Kabam has fallen in love with tenacity abilities, and every other new champion seemingly is able to shrug off stun debuffs or non-damaging debuffs or whatever. And in addition to that, we see more and more tenacity nodes being applied, so on and so forth. And Storm Pyramid X will capitalize on all of that, because she's one of the very, very few champions in game who actually has abilities to counter that. The downfall of Storm Pyramid X, I would probably say, is partially the unimpressive damage. She can do significant amount of damage, but her crit rate is so low and so bad, and she really does rely on kind of like getting lucky and dropping that crit. In addition, there are mutants that do anything that she does outside of countering, actually everything, because Apocalypse does that better. So anyways, yeah, basically anything she does, there are better mutants for. She certainly isn't, again, a bad champion at all. I enjoy her a lot, but currently I cannot put her higher just because she's up against a very stiff competition this year, especially stiff competition in her class, and this is where she lands. So that is Storm Pyramid X. Now we're going to move on to spot number 12, and spot number 12 I feel is going to be, again, possibly the most controversial pick in this list. But hear me out, will ya? Don't start spamming comment sections. I'm going to put Tigra there. Now, I do know that Tigra has the potential to land up in the upper tiers of anything that has been released this year. She actually does share quite a lot of similarities with champions like Ghost and Quake, which I absolutely love. The reason for that is that she can kind of bypass a lot of fight mechanics and just kind of like, once you are very good with her, you just effectively play with yourself and much less what opponent's doing. The tricky part comes when it significantly alters how you can and should play Tigra depending on each and every single champion you're going up against, because you do have to have ability to manage spacing and timing extremely well, which is one of the harder things to do in game, period. And therefore Tigra comes in game with incredibly high skill cap, because if you do not spam those heavy attacks and punish opponents' actions with your heavy attacks, she becomes pretty much immediately mediocre to a bottom level champion. However, if you happen to play her perfectly, she can potentially land towards upper end of 2020 champions. The problem is, because there is such significant difference of your own ability to play Tigra and Tigra's ability in the game, in the fight itself. Now, she offers a large amount of damage, quite a bit of utility, and a unique playstyle, and she has a significant cult following, and I personally like Tigra as well. I'm not anywhere good enough with her to kind of like properly go Tigra's hype train, but I do want to put in some more practice and possibly rank her up in the future, because I do really enjoy the idea of the character. The problematic reality is that any fight you would potentially bring Tigra in, there are always better options for, and unlike Quake or Ghost, she doesn't quite peak her respective class or peak the champion's top list. What I'm trying to say is that Tigra, in my opinion, has arguably the most complicated and hard to use playstyle in the game, but even if you manage to learn her absolutely perfectly, she still doesn't quite offer as much benefit as Quake and Ghost and many of the other champions that are significantly easier to use, like Nick Fury's, Aegon's, and whoever. So Tigra's in this very strict predicament where if you pull her, you're gonna not get any value out of her unless you put in a significant amount of practice. The problem is that even after you put in a significant amount of practice, there are champions who will simply do better than she can do in most of the scenarios. But all things considered, she's definitely one of the champions that I personally want to learn to play with, and she has also all the potential in the world to move up the ranks once more and more people become proficient with her and fully unlock her like absolute capabilities. Because I don't think we have seen the best of her yet, and she has all the chance to move up the list as more and more people pick her up. Right, spot number 11, I'm going to keep it quite brief, Sasquatch. Now, Sasquatch, I'm personally not a fan of him offensively. He is a defensive powerhouse, though, especially with his signature ability. He's one of the trickier map 7 mini-bosses. He has some insane health pool, insane regen, and has a potential for some very, very crazy damage output. Reasonable amount of utility. My personal gripes with the character would be the uncontrollable nature of Wrath of Tenrak, and the whole way how you build up these Tenrak charges and how you place Raptures. There is some amount of control given to you, but ultimately it's all RNG dependent, and therefore quite often you do need to fragment your playstyle when you get to exactly, let's say, 2.9 bars of power, and you would be ready to start spamming your special attacks while opponent has a bunch of Raptures, and then Wrath of Tenrak just doesn't activate. And there are plenty of situations using Sasquatch, and again, I am not definitely the most experienced Sasquatch player, where just seemingly it seems more fluff, more messing about than it's worth compared to how many awesome stacked Mystic Champions we have seen. But definitely a lot of potential for this guy in plenty of scenarios. And again, he is one of the Alliance War defensive staples, and he's providing people with a lot of kills on defense. That's also definitely worth to mention. And he has one of the more controversial synergies with Sabretooth that had been released this year, which I also kind of like and definitely will mark it as a plus for him. Unfortunately, it didn't quite live long in its original form. But yeah, Sasquatch, not too much bad to say about him. Definitely a good champion. Definitely a good pick and a reasonable rank up choice. Now, spot number 10. I can already feel the hate for spot number 10. And it's unfortunate, but it's HitMonkey. The unfortunate truth about HitMonkey is he is no skill Corvus in no way, shape, or form. There are a lot of things that people overlook when they overhype champions. And in case of HitMonkey, one of his biggest downfalls was his minuscule armor and block proficiency, which is quite horrible, combined with a small health pool, in addition to the fact that he relies on guaranteed crits and bleeds for his max damage output. He inherits both of the weaknesses, so he can be punished by, let's say, corner nodes as well as by game mechanics like Ebony Moss and so forth. And overall, he definitely is a good addition to the contest, but quite surprisingly, unlike actual Corvus, he has made the biggest impact in the game on Alliance War defense, and as a defensive character that is very annoying to fight against, and also kind of like extremely punishing if you ever happen to knock him down. So whenever you are fighting him, you're extremely discouraged to ever knock him down or use a special attack, and that can make a lot of fights, a lot of nodes extremely tricky. I have certainly gotten my ass handed to me by HitMonkey. Luckily I didn't die to him on Alliance or defense, but in quests, especially whilst you learn, HitMonkey is quite a tricky opponent to go up against. Offensively, again, he's quite flashy, quite good, not quite good enough in my opinion. Therefore he lands in spot number 10 overall this year. We're going to be moving on to spot number 9, and that will be Dragon Man. No, wait, actually I swapped out Dragon Man. Haha. Sorry, my bad. I had some last minute edits in the video. Spot number 9 is going to be Longshot now. The thing with Longshot is he is a solid Mystic Champion, and one of the things that I like most about him is that he's a Mystic Champion that doesn't rely on Mystic Dispersion, which is relatively rare, and that is absolutely awesome. Unfortunately, there are significant downfalls when it comes to the value of Longshot. Number one would be that he does absolutely nothing other Mystic Champions don't do or don't do better. Only thing that he really has going for him is a really high damage output in matchups where opponents have a lot of buffs, and high damage output in any other matchup. However, it does typically come with significant playstyle limitations, as well as the fact that his Fate Seal is tied to his Incinerate, so he inherits the weaknesses of champions who can deal with debuffs, and that significantly limits his usage as well. And overall, when I look at Longshot, I look at it as a luxury item. He is a rank up that I have personally, he's a champion that I have personally took to rank 5, and I have gotten my money's worth out of him. The thing about him, however, is it's a luxury item. I haven't used him in a single scenario where I couldn't have used other Mystic Champion who can do the same thing Longshot has and more. So ultimately that alone kind of like demotes his value in my personal eyes. Obviously, as I said before, he still is very fun, very solid Mystic Champion overall. And another contradiction that, in my opinion, significantly hinders his usability is the fact that he is extremely reliant on attack modifiers and your ability to increase his attack and therefore deal more Incinerate damage. Likewise, Suicide Masteries would be the most common way to do so. However, he has 0 immunities and relies on spamming those level 2s and getting them quicker, and then at the same time it means that you can't really use him for too many fights at his best, in my opinion. So that's also kind of like contradictory character model, but overall very solid champion, and in my opinion 9th best champion released in 2020. Moving on to number 8, and you guys probably already guessed that is a champion that I swapped in place of Longshot. Initially they were reversed, but again I'm going to put Dragon Man over there. The reasons for that is because, well, first and foremost, I think he has also already managed to prove his value, not only on alliance or defense, but also on questing front. He's definitely a very solid choice for alliance quest, especially because he kind of enters the god mode after level 3, and having that increased amount of power gain helps you get there very quickly, and then you go unstoppable, and then you can't die basically, and you can just use him as a single champion for entire AQ, and on top of that you gain very sustainable access to unstoppable, which is still a rare ability offensively. There are plenty of champions who can go unstoppable, but a bunch of them are old and borderline unusable. And then another thing that is kind of common with unstoppable champions is that Kabam is quite typically afraid to have an easy access to unstoppable, because unstoppable is a very powerful ability both offensively and defensively, and Dragon Man is one of the first champions that accesses it extremely freely on demand for prolonged periods of time. Therefore, one of the most painful nodes in the game is kind of like in the pocket of Dragon Man. So for sure, he has his downsides, like his lack of typical Mystic champion features, but a lot of that has been overcompensated by how he deals with opponents who do have buffs. On top of that, obviously he's a Mystic robot, which is extremely unique combination, so he can benefit from Mystic Dispersion, but at the same time he also has innate strong matchups against a lot of mutants, and that is super helpful as well, because like, let's say Omega Red will never get any spores on him, so on and so forth. A lot of mutant champions are hindered against robot champions specifically. And as a unique defensive aspect, he also counters the most common robot counters. So he's a counter to a counter, if you will, because whenever he's armor broken, you place quite significant degen on opponents, and he's immune to armor shatter. So that's basically bye-bye Medusa and Vision Arcus. So overall, a very interesting addition to the contest. It's going to be, I'm going to definitely be looking very closely where he goes from there. He's very good alliance or defense, frequently used on AQ and many other places, in my opinion, and I hope to see him raise to prominence more and more. Right, and now the final champion of today's list. And again, I'm sorry this video is 22 minutes long. I did try my best to keep it as brief as I could, but champion number 7 this year, so 7th best champion, if you will, is Mojo. Now, I know that not everybody would agree with me, but I have a lot of very significant reasons why I value Mojo as highly as I do. First and foremost, now, with the exception of newly released Spider Pig and arguably Gladiator Hulk, Mojo's primary damage output is degeneration, which pretty much nothing in the game is immune to. So that is a very significant upside. In addition to that, it's not just a degeneration, it's a passive degeneration. So he is a champion that has a very easy, consistent, permanent access to damage over time effect that nothing is immune to. And it also bypasses stuff like cornered, clapbacks, and whatever else that you have. He is a very dominant alliance war defender. He's one of those champions that everybody kind of like gulps before they actually start fighting in alliance war. Obviously he's Mystic champion, so he's quite commonly slain by Human Torch, but if you place him somewhere Human Torch is not an option, he will almost always be a tricky opponent to go up against. I am sure many of us still remember Flow Wars and what a nightmare Mojo was in those Flow Wars. And on top of all of that, I also really like his character model that is perfect for a Mystic champion, where you give opponent buffs yourself and then you benefit from them having had buffs. Now, his nullification abilities, if we're honest, aren't quite the best. He nullifies like only a single buff with his level 1, and other than that he deals with buffs that expire extremely well, but not so good and not so well against permanent buffs. But all things considered, I do think that Mojo is extremely valuable addition to the contest, both offensively and both defensively. He's one of the more popular alliance war defenders that significantly gives up their opponents nightmares about facing Mojos. And on top of all of that, I do find him to be very potent, very valuable offensive champion as well. There is a bit of a ramp up involved in Mojo, but in any medium to longer level fight, you do not rely on him being ramped up at all whatsoever. On top of that, he doesn't have the best block proficiency or physical resistances and minuses, but he does have very persistent healing that gets more potent the less health you have, so you can actually use him as a very sustainable champion as well and mitigate your chip damage on top of all of that. So yeah, I do think Mojo trumps HitMonkey. I do think Mojo trumps Sasquatch. I do think Mojo trumps Storm Pyramid X, Dragon Man, or Longshot, and is a very versatile champion that you can rank up and rest assured that you will get some benefit from. Either he's going to go on defense or either you're going to rely on him offensively. And yeah, that is pretty much it for today. 25-minute long video. My apologies. At least the next one only goes over 6 champions. And I promise I'm going to be quicker on that one. However, if you did enjoy today's video, then hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the buttons. And I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So